Erev Tov, Chanukah Sameach. Yosef HaTzadik, so he's called Yosef HaTzadik, we all know because of the incident with the wife of Potiphar. But the Meforshim point out that there's another element to his righteousness. One of the symbols and traits of a tzaddik is the fact that one does not become arrogant. In fact, the Moshe Rabbeinu is our teacher because he was the owner of Mikol Adam. Now, we would think that a person that achieves what Moshe achieved, he's in heaven, he goes 40 days without sleep, without eating, without drinking, etc., would have a high regard of himself. But the Meforshim point out there's a great difference between a high regard for oneself, which is necessary, because otherwise one can never accomplish anything in life, and arrogance, which means lording it over others simply because of the fact that I have been successful, so to speak, in whatever endeavor we're talking about. And Yosef, therefore, is elevated to the level of a tzaddik, not only because he resisted the physical temptation of Potiphar's wife, which is a great act in itself, but because of perhaps a greater temptation. Imagine he's a servant, a slave, he's in jail. He hasn't had a shower in 2 years. And overnight, he is transformed into the viceroy of Egypt. And Paro announces that everyone has to be subservient to him. And the Torah says, "V'koru lefonav avrech." What does the word avrech mean here? So there's a, Rashi says it's a nutrikun, it's a shortening for av b'chochma, rach b'shonim. Even though he's young, he's an old wise man, etc. But the simple explanation of Avrech, as Eben Ezra and the others point out, is that when his chariot rode through the street, the guard said, Avrech, bow down, mitberech, kol berech l'chos sichra. You see films of dictators of the past century, mass crowds all bowing to the great person. You have this mass, it's almost the hysteria, brainwashing, North Korea, China, all of these places. Millions of people. So when they call the Avrech to bow down, so one would imagine that it has an effect upon the person who sees everybody bowing down to him. It has an effect. They once asked Harry Truman, after he was no longer president, what was it that he missed most about no longer being president? And he said that now when I enter a room, the Marine band is not playing Hail to the Chief, which is an honest assessment. And we see that Yosef is not affected by it. And because of that, therefore, that became one of the pillars of the fact that he was called Yosef HaTzadik, because he didn't let it go to his head. And we'll see later in the story of the revelation to his brothers how important that issue remains. Because that really is the issue that allows him to reconcile himself with his brothers, to forgive them for what they did to him. Because a person of arrogance does not have forgiveness. A person that everybody bows down to him and he thinks that they're supposed to bow down to him, that he's really special. So he doesn't reconcile himself with those who opposed him or those whom he felt hurt him. So that's a level of attainment that is really tzidkut, that is really righteousness. And Chazal always emphasized that true righteousness is psychological. It's not in the outside pretenses of righteousness. And therefore, Chazal pointed out that there were very few people who ever were named Tzaddik. In the Gemara, we have someone Binyamin HaTzadik. But generally, you don't find that. I mean, today the word is used rather loosely. It became, commonplace. And anything that becomes commonplace loses its importance, its definition. But Chazal were very careful on it. And therefore, in Tanakh, you find it used very sparingly. And in the Gemara also. Because of the fact that they realized that arrogance is the enemy of being a tzaddik. And therefore, when the Torah describes Rekoru Lefonov Avreich, that they called his name, to bow down to him, that was a test. How was he going to react to that? And if he reacts responsibly, the way he should, so then that is also part of the reason why he is called and remembered as being Yosef HaTzadik. Rabbi Hanania ben Akash Omer, what's HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'zakos es Yisrael l'fichal hiber lahem Torah mitzvos shene'emar Adonai chafetz l'man tzidko yagil Torah v'yadir.